Hello, everyone.
Hi,
Hello.
Dr. Chinmaya.
Hello. Just a minute.
Sorry, I'm chatting away to you and I forgot.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Dennis.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Oh dear, I was chatting away to you things, and then I realized I haven't put my microphone on yet.
All right.
Really? Oh, anyway. Oh yes.
So we will start the session Global PV GPVS Ambassador Series. This is
Mm.
session 3. And yes, good afternoon, good morning, and everyone. Thanks for joining. So today we have Dr. Dennis Richard from South Africa. She is the CEO and director of Danish Research Consulting and affiliated lecturer in pharmacology at University of with Strand. Dr. Dennis is an independent consultant in pharmacovigilance and regulatory affairs relating to drugs and medical devices for international and national pharmaceutical and medical device companies. Is a graduate of the University of Witwatersrand Medical School. She has been a lecturer or guest lecturer in the Department of Pharmacology since 1993, and where she still provides postgraduate courses in clinical research, drug safety, and research ethics. For the past 33 years, she's been awarded firstly in academia, establishing a drug research facility for the Department of Pharmacology and later a coordinating company for the university's clinical research activity. This was followed by involvement in a specialized research company to perform clinical trial research in drug and medical devices, providing services to these industries. She has specialized in all aspects of regulatory requirements for research, development, registration of drugs and devices, and set up a pharmaceutical department for the research company in 2008. The first have been provided to industry since then, uh, and later through an independent consultancy since 2012. Special interest is Her special interest is in sleep research, especially the influence of medications, medical procedures, and disease on sleep. And for this, she was a founder member of the Sleep Society in South Africa in 1996, and now the South African Society for Sleep and Health. Welcome, Dr. Dennis Richard, and now the platform is yours. You can present your valuable talk on regulations of PV in uh, South in African countries. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chin. It's a privilege to be here, and thank you for inviting me. Will I share my screen now, or
Yes,
have you already? Is
yes, ma'am. You can share your screen.
okay, right. Okay. Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone, wherever you are. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to talk to you. I'm going to be talking about PV in Africa, and you may wonder why the giraffe is there, apart from the fact that they're only found in Africa. But they're so tall and they can see over all the trees and everything else. And I'm hoping that what I'm going to share with you today is going to help you to also see over all the confusion and the chaos and the lack of organization that we tend to have in Africa. Africa, as you know, is huge, and the challenges here are even larger. So I hope you find the information valuable, and I'm hoping also that this overview will help you For those of you who are going to be attending the conference next week for the Africa Pharmacovigilance Conference, and I know that a number of people from our organization are speaking there, so they will have a lot more detailed information. As I said, the topic is large, so I will be giving you an overview of what is happening in general in Africa. So as with the elephant, we will take this bite by bite. And we're going to be looking at a bit of harmonization, the kind of initiatives that are actually ongoing at the moment in Africa and which have been proposed and have been implemented for a number of years now. We're going to look at the African Medicines Agency, and this is going to be Africa's answer to the EMA. I'm not too sure how long it's going to take to achieve what the EMA has achieved, because there is still not buy-in from the whole continent, but we'll have a look at what the agency actually is. We look at harmonization, who are the main role players, and then the status in each of the regions. And essentially, we'll look at each region in turn, at the countries that are there and what has been happening in these particular areas. We'll look at a program which I believe is going to be our answer for PV, very exciting, the AU3S, and then challenges and opportunities that exist for us on this huge continent, and then I'll do a small conclusion. So if we look at the initiatives that are ongoing at the moment in Africa, we have a harmonization program in the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Initiative. And this is overseeing a lot of what is happening. And if we look, Africa has got 55 countries. We've got interregional relationships of various kinds. We have collaborations of various kinds. And as far as PV is concerned, for the most part, the EU guidelines have been adapted for local conditions. So essentially, wherever there is some kind of vigilance across the continent, you will find that it is that the requirements are very, very much the same as the EU guidelines, which is very helpful. So at least you know, if there is a regulatory authority, they will have a guideline that you will be familiar with. Now, if we look at the continent again, so those are all the countries, but these are the regions that we look at. So we've got the West African region, which is ECOWAS, the Economical West African region, but there's also the West African Health Organization, which is part and parcel of this, but doesn't actually work in all of the countries. And then you've got the small few countries here, which don't really have much influence anyway, and they are usually incorporated either with ECOWAS or with the Central Sub-Saharan African distribution. And this area here is what they call IGAD, and also it has a few synonyms. But what is of note here is that even though you will have a region, you will have other countries that will then be part of that region, or they may be part of another region. So, for example, in East Africa, we have the East African Community, but now we have the incorporation of South Sudan into the East African Community, as well as the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the Democratic Republic of Congo is also part of the SADC region. So it becomes very confusing, and it becomes very difficult to see how on earth we're going to achieve harmonization when you have numbers of countries, for example, here, whose guidelines are going to be effective. Would it be the one to the south, the one to the east, the one to the north, or the one, or which one is it going to be? So we've got the 6 regions, and that really is our harmonization initiative. And then we have the formation of the African Medicines Agency, which is where, as I said, we hope, this is where our hope lies, is that we'll be able to bring together all of this into one agency. So there are other harmonization and conversion activities that are ongoing. The WHO has got its regional centers of regulatory excellence, and these more or less overlap, but that concentrates more on clinical trials and, of course, pharmacovigilance. So if we have a look here, we'll see those are the areas, and there's the African Medicines Agency. But now these are the affiliations, and these are what are in place today. But as I said, some of them overlap, and other countries belong to larger groups. So I've just given you a breakdown here of all of the economic and collaborative groups that the countries can belong to. And as I said, the African Medicines Agency is going to be, for us, the answer, hopefully. So the regional coordination centers, this is the WHO regional coordination centers, and you'll notice that they have got these are almost the same as this. Central Africa here is just larger, and here East Africa is larger, but these are regional centers where they are working from in order to try and coordinate the functions of the WHO. And just one part that I'd like you to notice here is that this is the North African group, and this is the Maghreb area Union, and there's a little piece of land here, which is the country number 55. You've seen that I've got 54 out of 55 countries have more or less have an MRA. But this is country number 55, and this is Sawari, and this is in dispute because Morocco has claimed it, but so has Algeria. So this little country here doesn't really appear on anything. And of course, Egypt has got the alliance with the League of Arab States, which is then across the borders here. And Egypt is therefore part of that alliance. So if we have looked at what do we need for effective regulation, well, first of all, we need the law. We need the law to lay down the sections with which we must comply. We need to have appropriate and adequate governance mechanisms. It's no use having the law if it's not implemented, and not implemented equally and appropriately across the whole country or across the region. We need to have technical expertise. Now, we've got a lot of technical expertise in Africa. Unfortunately, a lot of it leaves. And then we are left with whatever is behind, and the young people coming up again, and they will then provide the expertise, and then hopefully they stay, but very often they leave. We need sound scientific tools to be able to determine the effects of the drugs, because here I am talking about PV. We need to be able to look at the drugs in detail to be able to decide, have we got a signal or not? Funding in Africa is notorious. The amount of corruption in the continent is notable, and my own country is probably the leader in the field. But sustainable funds are just not available for most of the countries to be able to run an efficient PV department. We need human resources. We need experience and qualifications from people who will do the assessment of the drugs, the adverse events as they come in, to see, have we got a signal or do we not have a signal? Is this serious or is it not? Is it related or is it not? We need inspectors who need to go and check up on everybody, and especially the market authorization holders who should have a PV department, and to see, are they doing what they should be doing? Are they adhering to the guidelines and to the regulations of the particular country? So we need to have capacity building. We need to coordinate regulatory activities, and coordination in Africa is proving to be very difficult. And of course, you need to monitor and evaluate. Are you doing things the right way, or is there room for improvement? And very often, and most often, there is room for improvement. So we need to be able to assess the performance of the various departments and regulatory authorities. So the AMA, I will just touch on this briefly, established in 2018. 54 out of our 55 countries do have a regulatory authority of some sort, but the functioning and the capacity of the agency is highly variable. And we do have some of them that have got only one person performing a task. And for the rest of it, there really isn't much happening at all. Some of them are semi-autonomous. Others, they are part of the Ministry of Health. Some of them only regulate medicinal products, medical devices. Others have got to regulate food and cosmetics as well. And some of them even have disinfectants added in. So the actual scope of each of the regulatory authorities can also vary enormously between the countries within those groups that we've just spoken about. 87% of them, and this I found quite frightening when I read up on the AMA, 87% really lack functional PV systems. That's very, very frightening. None of our MRAs are at the WHO maturity level 4 in terms of their viability, their efficiency, etc. We do have 5 countries that have got to level 3: Ghana, Tanzania, Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa. So these regulatory authorities are at maturity level 3. And then they are at maturity level 3, but not for all regulatory functions, mainly for vaccines in Africa at the moment. So the AMA treaty is also very limited in its implementation because not all the countries have signed. I think we've got 33 countries that have signed. The rest of them haven't, and that's out of 54 if you don't count Sawari. And in the main, for most of the countries, there's no budgetary support for their national pharmacovigilance activities. There's a lot of donor funding going on, and the Bill and Melinda Gates funding is huge in Africa. There's a lot of the regulatory authorities that rely totally on donor funding to be able to function. So the PV activities, you don't pay in Africa to be able to submit your report, which I believe in Europe that you do, and I speak under correction there, but I think everywhere else that you do. The feeling is that if one had to introduce a fee to be able to submit your AE or ADR report, that is actually going to dampen the growth of the PV systems even further because people don't want to pay. Training in Africa, we have some very good training programs, but they're mainly in English. The Francophone countries, I don't have any record of training that they have in the particular areas that they operate in. So it's mainly in English. So the implications for our countries with the lack of PV knowledge and experience and collection of events really is that our populations are being exposed to potentially unsafe products. The quality can be variable and the effectiveness can be variable. We know that there is a huge amount of substandard and counterfeit medicines that circulate in Africa. It's quite frightening how much counterfeit medicine is around. And again, this is due to the lack of regulations, the lack of oversight. And all of these items that prevents the rational use of medicines. So we can't actually have the medication working as efficiently as it could in as large a population as it could, because of all the factors that we've got influencing what we have on the shelves and how they are used. And all of this, of course, is very detrimental to public health and patient safety. So when we look at the role players in harmonization, and harmonization is reasonably new. The AMRH started in 2009, and I've given you a basic diagram here of how it works and the kind of technical committees that they've established, which are feeding into the steering committee to promote harmonization. And again, we have so many definitions that your head spins at times. So I've given you all of the definitions here. The most important ones are the African Union Commission, the African Union Development Agency, and NEPAD, which is the new partnership for Africa's development. And those really are the organizations that are spearheading and trying to keep this whole big continent lumbering along to progress towards more efficient drug use, drug registration, and safer drugs by virtue of pharmacovigilance reporting. The AMRH is in 33 countries, so we've got another 22 to go, but it operates through the regional economic communities, the ones that I showed you that the WHO has identified. And so these are the communities where we find that the AMRH is working. And again, please note all the bits and pieces here. So the Southern African Development Community, SADC, but here we also have the Common Market for Southern Africa and Eastern Africa, COMESA. So we've got overlaps all over the show. So to know where you are and what organization you should be talking to, it's sometimes quite difficult. So the main focus areas for the AMRH at the moment are the pharmaceutical manufacturing plan. We need to make our own drugs, and this is happening, and it's happening in a number of countries. We need to look at the responsibility that we have in terms of the diseases which actually affect Africa the most: HIV, TB, and malaria. And we need a health research strategy, but for Africa as a whole, not just for parts of Africa. And that is under review at the moment. So watch the space and hopefully we'll have good news. So the regional centers of regulatory excellence. Notice Ghana for pharmacovigilance. Ghana has got one of the best pharmacovigilance systems on the continent. It also has got the best training facilities and training programs that you will find in Ghana. Kenya as well. Pharmacovigilance is excellent in Kenya. Now, if there is going to be harmonization, then it would make sense that the systems in Ghana would be used for the equal. Sorry, is that a question? Oh, okay, microphone open. So it would make sense to have the countries where the excellence is already available, that they would take the lead for that particular region in terms of PV or for regulatory functions training. Tanzania is excellent. Nigeria has got regulatory function training as well as quality assurance and control of medicine. So that's where NAFDAC actually shines. South Africa as well, quality assurance and control of medicines, because our SAPRA is very good in terms of their processes. They are very tight and they've got the borders sewn up, hopefully. Zimbabwe, as far as registration of medicines is concerned, evaluation, quality assurance, control, and clinical trial oversight. Zimbabwe is excellent as far as that's concerned. Uganda, their excellence lies with GMP, good manufacturing processes and licensing. And in the East African community, they have got the lead as far as that's concerned. So the guidelines that they have developed and the processes are being used in the East African community. As far as ECOWAS is concerned, Burkina Faso has got excellent, pardon me. Let me just, I clean forgot to switch it off. Goodness. There we go. Okay, Burkina Faso in the ECOWAS region, they are excellent at clinical trials oversight, and they do a lot of clinical trials because they are an area of excellence. And I mean, I've been involved with some of those trials, and they really are very good. Ghana as well for registration, evaluation, and clinical trials. Again, Ghana, a very good clinical trial country. And then Tanzania, as far as medicine evaluation and registration is concerned, they are taking the lead for that. However, what I did notice when I was looking at these various countries is that there's no representation from North Africa whatsoever, nothing. And we do know that Egypt has got an excellent PV system, and they've also got manufacturing, and Morocco has got very strong PV systems. And yet, as far as the African Union Development Agency and NEPAD are concerned, they are not yet designated as a regional center of regulatory excellence. And that's something which needs to be looked at. So we're going to have a quick look through each of the regions just to see what is, where they are and what are they doing. So East Africa, the East African community is, as far as Africa is concerned, is the most harmonized of any of the regions. They have already harmonized their GMP functions through the Uganda processes, as well as registration of medicines. They've got an online portal where you can apply once for all of the countries in the East African community, and they're very efficient. So the current partners are Burundi and Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, and Zanzibar. And why would I have this the same when this Zanzibar is part of Tanzania? Well, they've got two regulatory authorities, believe it or not, which is they perform different functions, but they've got two regulatory agencies in one country. Now, the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan, they have applied for membership to the EAC, and they are busy at the moment getting all their processes compliant so that they can now become a full member. One of the biggest problems, though, in this area, even with its efficiency, and even though they are the forerunners for harmonization, is that there are human resources issues. It's still a problem in Africa. Not enough people, and the availability is unsustainable. So we still need to have more done in terms of training and retaining people here. As far as pharmacovigilance is concerned, there's no harmonization yet. However, Kenya is the leader in the area, so it would be no surprise if when they do have their harmonization completed, that Kenya's guidelines will take the lead. At the moment, national guidelines are followed. What has happened, and again, this is part of the almost fragmentation that happens in Africa, is that the Kenyan Pharmaceutical and Poisons Board, their regulatory authority, has allied themselves with the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, which is the IGAD area, which is to the north here of the EAC. And they are now looking at collaborating in terms of post-marketing surveillance and PV activities. So even though the EAC doesn't have a harmonization, it looks like it's taking place to the north of the country. So that will then encompass Kenya, Uganda, Djibouti, Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, and South Sudan. So that will be a harmonization to the north. When you're looking at regulatory work, and again, the financing comes into it, the Kenyan, the Tanzanian FDA, the Kenya PPB, and Uganda, a National Drug Agency, they do charge fees for their services and for registration and for anything else, because they get minimal or no government funding. But for the rest, Zanzibar, Rwanda, Burundi, there is full government funding. And I have no doubt that the DRC and South Sudan would probably also have to go on to government funding, because I don't think that they would be introducing at the beginning, that they would be introducing fee for service. The ECOWAS area, as you can see, it's a huge area. There are 15 different countries here, 3 languages, English, French, Portuguese, and there are regulatory agencies in most of the countries. There are English-speaking and French-speaking, mostly falling under the ministries of health in those countries. But the harmonization is not happening, and this is mainly the age-old conflict between languages, English and French-speaking countries. I mean, if there's been conflict between England and France for centuries, I mean, what can we say in Africa? We're still pretty young. The West African Health Organization is overseeing this whole area. However, it must be borne in mind that we do have some conflict going on. There is a lot of internal or what am I looking for? Uproar, upset. So that's going to affect everything as well. The WHO is very active here. They have got a collaborative registration procedure, which they've got into the guidelines for the West African Health Organization, but it's not yet that well established, put it that way. So the MRH project, the West African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Project, this is going. However, there are only 7 active regulatory agencies that are participating, and those are the ones that are obvious: Ghana and Nigeria, but also Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Sierra Leone, and Togo. Those are the only regulatory authorities that are actually working in this harmonization project. And it's mainly for registration of products. But again, the process is not efficient. There's not enough technology, there's not enough people, and the process itself is not working properly, because the various regulatory agencies are not working at the same kind of pace, because they don't have enough people. And so you've got a very disjointed type of flow. And most people, when you are registering a medication, you want to know where your application is, and how much time is still going to be needed to get to registration, because registration means that you can make money. And so you need to know what is happening. And that is one of the biggest stumbling blocks at the moment. So as far as pharmacovigilance is concerned, no indication yet of harmonization. And if they are struggling that badly with registration, I'm not holding my breath for harmonization of PV. As far as the African Union Development Agency summaries of this area is concerned, they state that medicines are inaccessible for the majority of West Africans, which is a very, very sad state of affairs. Most medications are imported, and by virtue of being imported, they are probably going to be expensive and therefore unaffordable. Production and efficacy of medicines and vaccines, that depends on effective regulatory systems. So There needs to be legislation. There needs to be legislation that is enforced. There needs to be quality control, and there needs to be pharmacovigilance and safety. Otherwise, your efficacy of your medicines and the manner in which they are distributed, it's just not going to work. And the feeling is that under harmonization, when the AMA comes about, that is actually going to undermine the whole process that is taking place in the WHO at the moment. So that is also food for thought. Not the first time that I've seen that remark. When we're looking at the north of Africa, and remember, Egypt is excluded, so we're looking at Libya, Tunisia, Morocco, and Algeria and Mauritania. Pardon me. There is a variability in the pharmacovigilance systems across this region, and it's a small number of countries. Morocco is a center of excellence, as is Tunisia. Algeria, they're getting there, but they're not at the level of Morocco. Mauritania has nothing. There's nothing going on at all. And Libya is very poor. And again, internal conflict and lack of funding affects the whole region. And then we have this little slice of land here, which is no man's land. So the AMU as an organization, in the literature, they are considering that it is a stagnant area. There's no cooperation going on between the various countries, and there's a lot of political tension, and there's a lot of disagreement that has arisen. And it's historic because there was a situation when Libya took over the chairmanship of the region, and after that it seems as if everything fell apart. So also to note that these countries also belong to the League of Arab States. So they could then utilize the harmonized guidelines that have been produced for the Arab states. And those guidelines are excellent. So if they had the will, they could implement them at the drop of the hat, because the processes are all there, they're well described, and they are well accepted, also based on the EU guidelines, but adapted for the Arab states. So again, one has the overlap that you have a region, but they're also members of the League of Arab States. When we look at the Egyptian Drug Authority, this is like a shining light on the continent, in the northern part of the continent. It was the first of the countries in the Eastern Mediterranean region to reach that level 3, the WHO recognition for vaccine regulation, and that's quite an achievement. And it was 9th at the global level, and that really is something to be exceptionally proud of. They work under the supervision of the Ministry of Health, and they've got 3 different and independent organizations which form the Drug Authority. And they've got the Central Administration for Pharmaceutical Affairs, and essentially the registration and pricing of medicines, inspections and manufacturing facilities all fall under that particular organization. Then they have their quality control for products, and that is the National Organization for Drug Control and Research. And this is where their pharmacovigilance fits in. And then they have the Organization for Research and Control of Biologicals for marketing authorization and licensing. So very distinct organizations, and each with a very clearly defined role. What is excellent in Egypt is that they have the Egyptian Pharmaceutical Vigilance Center, and this is a national PV center, and the provisions for the center are already included in the Medicines Act, which provide for these activities as part of a registration mandate. And there is a National Adverse Drug Reaction, or PV, Pharmacovigilance Advisory Committee. And the EU guidelines were adopted, but they adapted it specifically for Egypt. The Egyptian Drug Authority also has collaborations. One is with South Africa, I'm very pleased to say. We've got a memorandum of understanding that was signed this year, and it's going to be for pharmaceuticals, especially for hepatitis C, which is prevalent in the two areas. And then they've got the Egyptian African Health Alliance, and also historical collaborations with Zimbabwe. That's been going on for many years for the control of pharmaceuticals. And of course, they are a member of the Arab League, the League of Arab States. Now, we spoke a little bit about the IGAD, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, and this is not essentially a WHO region, but these states have formed a partnership, and their focus really is in integration and cross-border cooperation. And as you've seen, Kenya and Uganda have formed part of this organization as well. And it's actually quite strange, really, because the headquarters are in Djibouti, and Djibouti doesn't have a PV system of any kind, and no PV culture of any kind. So there's no harmonization. Each country follows their own guidelines. And then we have this massive collaboration here, which goes all the way down, includes Kenya and Somalia, and goes into it excludes the Uganda and South Sudan and anything to the south of there, but it's a massive area. And this is the Community of Sahel-Saharan states. And essentially, they have been trying to get a collaborative effort together. Regulatory convergence has been discussed, but it doesn't look as if it's possible, and it's mainly due to a lack of will. But again, I would ask the question is, how would you have regulatory convergence unless it's under something like the AMA? Because you've already got Egypt here, which is part of the League of Arab Nations. You've got Libya, which is part of the Northern African collaboration. Then you've got ECOWAS, and you've got part of the East African collaboration. So I cannot see that it would be a feasible proposal to actually have regulatory conversions. But the pharmacovigilance, from a pharmacovigilance perspective, again, there is no sign of any kind of a collaboration, and each country uses their own guidelines where there is an NMRA. And the Comores don't have a formal regulatory authority. Neither does Djibouti, as I've just mentioned, Mauritania, as I mentioned before, and Somalia. They don't have any kind of PV system in their regulatory authorities at all. So that's quite concerning for those areas. And then we come to the last region, which is Zazibona. And for anybody who has been around for a while, you will know that Zazibona was originally Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Namibia, which is where the region's name came from, Zazibona. Since then, Tanzania, the DRC, Malawi, Mozambique, and South Africa have joined the Zazibona region. So it's now a very large section. And this is also part of COMESA and part of the SADC region. Now, Zazibona really was established in the beginning to share the workload and to share the expertise and to exchange information. And there is a process that is in place to register a medication in the Zazibona region. However, it's only for generic medications, and the process is, at the moment, it is faltering. It's there, it is functional, but it's not efficient. And a review was done with the regulatory authorities themselves. Now, bearing in mind that pharmacovigilance is individual countries, there's no collaboration there. But when we dispense a drug, we dispense it with a label. And people read the labels. And when you are buying a drug or a medication at a pharmacy, you are buying it reading the label. Now, as far as the regulatory authorities are concerned, they have recognized that these here are problems that they have to solve. And the one, which to me is quite bizarre, is that the labeling requirements are different in the countries that are participating in the collaborative registration of drugs. Why would the labeling requirements be different? It actually doesn't make sense to me. The second thing that they recognize themselves, that on the country's websites, on all of the websites, there's a lack of information about Zazibona. And you really do struggle to find information about the process. How does it work? What are the milestones that you could expect? When are you going to get comments? How long are they going to take? How long have you got to answer the comments? Timelines. What kind of products are in the pipeline and what has been approved? So this is lacking on the websites. And essentially that, if you've got a registration that's been harmonized, that should be on all of the websites, the same information. They find that some of the countries are more stringent than others. And I would think that probably the South African Regulatory Authority, SAPRA, is pretty stringent. So the amount of control and of information required is more. It's not the same across the whole collaboration. There's a lack of clarity about the process and how to follow up in each country. And there's a difference in the implementation recommendations by the member countries. And quite frankly, one of my colleagues to the north of our Zazibona collaboration when we were speaking about collaborative areas and how efficiently they were working, she said to me, well, she said that in their experience, when they want to register something in one of the Zazibona countries, they do it on an individual country basis because Zazibona takes too long. So I thought that was quite an astute remark. Now, for the shining light, our shining light, which is what in my opinion, as somebody who's watching the PV systems developing over many years, is that the African Union started what they call the African Union Smart Safety Surveillance Program. And this was launched in 2020 when we were in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And it was mainly to monitor adverse events following immunization and adverse drug reactions that were following any kind of medication that was being used during the COVID pandemic. And there were only about 4 countries that actually started with the MedSafety app. And the priority medical products that are being looked at in the program at the moment are the ones that are most prevalent in the African context, and the diseases of HIV and AIDS, TB, malaria, and emergency diseases like Ebola and COVID. So those are the medical products that are being looked at are those that will be treating any one of those diseases. At the moment, this is where we are. And they're being used with the MedSafety app. And that is an app that goes onto your cell phone if you are not aware of it. I have an idea that it's also used in India and was used during the COVID pandemic. But the participating countries at the moment who have got the apps available on their regulatory websites are Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. And the whole aim of starting the program is to improve vigilance and to improve safety surveillance capacity across Africa. And that's using this particular app. And it's a very easy app to use. As long as you can install it on your phone, anybody can be trained to use it. And it's a very user-friendly kind of thing. You don't really even need much training. Now, what is being implemented this year is the AfriVigilance system, which is going to be a common African database, which I think is so exciting. On this database, they'll be able to detect safety signals, and they'll be able to combine cross-country data from all the countries that are now involved. And there's going to be an AU3S Joint Signal Management Group, which is going to validate and prioritize and assess all of these signal reports from the cross-country data. All of this is really going to be capacity strengthening because there'll be training involved. And what is being proposed is that there will be an end-to-end evaluation of the life cycle of medical products. And ideally, and this would be in the ideal world, and probably towards the end of the program, which I think is 10 years, they want to include both pre-market, so clinical trials, and post-market authorization data. So I think that this is a magnificent effort, and I applaud the people who actually thought it up and who have implemented it. So the meaning of SMART, and this comes from them, not from me. They say that SMART in the smart safety surveillance actually means that the principles that they have adopted are smart in terms of implementing all the solutions that they want, that they are envisaging that they want to do. And that the SMART approach adopts the use of pilot studies, which makes sense. I mean, this is the way to go. And to be able to show that it works, proof of concept before you scale it up, which is why we've only got 5 countries doing involved at the moment. So you can adopt best practices and experiences that you've used from your other initiatives that you've already gone through in your pilot studies. And you can leverage accessible and evolving technologies like your mobile reporting apps, AI, the way to go. And you've got early stakeholder engagement and buy-in across all levels of the program. And this is really the way to develop any kind of a program on a continent like Africa, where you've got so many different cultures, so many different languages, such different approaches to life. It really is the way to go. So what they aim to do is to develop a fit-for-purpose and best-in-class solution, which they have tested and which they've adapted to the local context. And that's what we have on the SAPRA website, where it promotes the use of the MedSafety mobile app. Here, the MedSafety app is being used for all kinds of adverse events and ADRs. So this is the proposal. That was when they started in October 2020, so 3 years ago. This is in phase 2, where they onboarded Kenya. So there you will see the countries that they started with, which was 4. So they added Kenya. And then in between 2023 and 2025, there are going to be additional priority health products added. And you are having the establishment of AfriVigilance. And between 2026 and 2030, so we've got a 10-year program, they want all the health priority health products to be added, as well as additional countries, and then the efficient running of AfriVigilance across those countries. So initially, again, English-speaking countries, because they are looking to develop a very robust model. But after that, the aim is to have regional and language diversity. So, for example, to the Francophone countries and probably to the Portuguese-speaking countries. And I have no doubt that there will be more adaptations that will develop as the program progresses. So when we look at the challenges, and unfortunately there is quite a list, the countries in Africa really do have a varying capacity for pharmacovigilance, and we've seen that. Human resources are a problem. Inadequate, unsustainable availability of staff. We don't even know numbers. The salaries are low. There are very few pharmaceutical professionals, and there is no support or budgetary, little or no budgetary support from the national governments for them. There's a high turnover of staff. And I mean, training takes time. Pharmacovigilance needs training, but it also needs experience. And when you've got a high turnover of staff, you're losing that. There's a shortage of training centers. I only know of Ghana. Anybody who can possibly enlighten me as to other places which have got really top-notch training centers, I'd be delighted to know. Lack of career structure and salaries, the brain drain. The brain drain is significant. Political and economic instability, that is key, and we've got a lot of that in Africa. Funding of regulatory work. We need mechanisms to ensure sustainability, and without funding, you cannot do anything. You cannot employ that staff. You cannot pay them decently. So some of them, as we've seen, some of them charge fees, others are fully government funded, and some of them are just donor funded. There's high level of debt. There's limited access to vaccines and medical resources. We need to translate the reporting tools into the local languages. In South Africa, we've got 11. How do you do the MedSafety app? It's going to have to be translated into the 11 official languages. That is just South Africa. What about the rest of Africa? The problem is massive. There are low numbers of healthcare providers relative to the number of patients. So the time that they actually can see that patient is very short. They are under a huge amount of pressure to see as many patients as they can per day. They don't have the time or the inclination to think about recording side effects. Even doctors in private practice who've got 15 minutes to see a patient, they are loath to report side effects. I know, I speak with them. And these are private practice people who should have more inclination to adhere to practicing for good pharmacovigilance. There's a high uptake of herbal and traditional medication, mostly self-medicated. How do we monitor that? How does it interact with the other medications? Again, pharmacovigilance made more difficult. There's very little access to drug utilization data. So how do you actually know what all the true risks of medicines are, especially if you're sitting in rural areas? And I mean, most of Africa has got huge rural areas. So you need to know how to be able to transmit the information so that people can use it. Most of the healthcare workers, if you say to them, you know, are you practicing pharmacovigilance? They look at you and they say, am I doing what? I don't know what that is. It's nothing that's done here. And even amongst decision makers, consumers, when people ask me, what do? I say, well, amongst other things, I do pharmacovigilance, and they're all very puzzled. They don't understand what it is. And then again, in Africa, it's been shown time and time again that you need to do clinical trials in Africa because of the diverse population. The same thing applies when you're looking at pharmacovigilance experience and when you are comparing that to evidence that you've got from Europe, from the US, from the Far East. Knowledge is not always generalizable. We need to take note and be cognizant of the uniqueness of the African population. So the opportunities, unfortunately, there are fewer because, I mean, they're pretty all-encompassing. So pooling of resources to have joint pharmacovigilance activities. Not too sure how that's going to work. However, embracing artificial intelligence, that could definitely help with efficiency in reporting. Promoting pharmacovigilance in all kinds of sectors and in areas where patients are being seen. It has got a large impact on healthcare quality. It can only make our patient care better. It can make it safer, and we can promote public health nationally and beyond our borders. We need to establish a culture where pharmacovigilance is systematically embedded, that it's not something that nobody knows about, that it's just an item that is an add-on. So therefore, we should look at regulatory collaboration, reliance models, and harmonization for improving safety and efficacy oversight. And I think that about sums up all of it. So in general, across the continent, over the last years, we have seen the regulatory landscape changing remarkably. It really has. And apart from the Sawari Republic, every country has got some kind of a regulatory agency. The functionality varies, the amount of growth varies, the maturity of them vary, the expertise within each regulatory authority varies. But we are seeing growth. At least 36 countries are members of the WHO program for international drug monitoring. But what we have seen is that from those 36 countries, we've only seen 1% of all of the ICSRs that have been gathered into VigiBase. And that's very sad. The main reporting countries for ICSRs are South Africa, Morocco, Nigeria, Egypt, and Kenya. And that's to be expected. Those are the countries where they are more organized and they've got more sophisticated systems. Public health programs in Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, and Zimbabwe have implemented cohort event monitoring. They are targeting spontaneous reporting to collect safety data, which is encouraging. And they've got active surveillance of new products. And that is really going to be much more relevant to assess drug risk profiles reliably in our area. But harmonization is a massive challenge, and funding is going to be the biggest problem. So that's my overview. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions or any comments or suggestions or can add more information, I'm open to your participation. Thank you. Dr. Chen, it's over to you.
Yes.
Anybody got any comments?
Thank you so much, Dr. Dennis. It's really a wonderful presentation. What I can say, you have covered all the areas. Really wonderful.
Outside.
And
but we've you know, in our organization, the one we have with you, we have got some amazing people that have got such huge knowledge, and I'm hoping that some of them were on this presentation, because I'd love to hear from them, because I listen with awe when they are speaking. And Dr. Hegasi, you are one of them. I can see you there.
Thank you so much. And if you allow me to comment.
Yes, please.
Number one, it's a wonderful presentation. And I was really focusing on each word that you are saying, especially that I will be involved in another event for pharmacovigilance called the AFRI Summit next week.
Mm-hmm. That's
so
right.
I will talk about maturity level of pharmacovigilance in Africa. So okay. I will talk something, but probably I will focus on, let me say, pharma industry side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the other couple of speakers from RANA FDA and from EGA will talk.
Yes.
So I hope that this can help as well in giving more light on what we need. Actually, as Dr. Shemaya mentioned, you covered the topic fully and in details. So for me, it will be very helpful in my presentation. This is number one. I noticed that one of the big issues that we are facing is the funding.
Yes.
In addition to training and awareness and other stuff, I believe funding, if we look at NGOs or foundations and as well the pharma companies,
Yes.
Some because they have money. Okay, I work in the pharma industry for like 25 years.
Mhm.
So I know that some companies they sell every year in Africa more than $1 billion or even
Yes.
more. So if we put some of their um, corporate social responsibilities,
Mhm.
some companies have foundations and activities.
Yes.
Personally, I was involved a few years ago in an event in Cote d'Ivoire, like 300 doctors from
Mm.
12, 13 African countries. I give a presentation on pharmacovigilance, and this for all of them was the first presentation ever they attended
Wow.
about drug safety. Okay,
Wow.
and those 300 doctors are all consultants, oncology, neurology, infertility. They are 45 years plus age. Okay,
Good
so
heavens.
imagine that no single person from any attended one lecture, okay, on pharmacovigilance. Actually, I repeated the presentation 5 times, two of them in French, with the
Mhm.
help of a French colleague, French speaking colleague, and it was the same, either English speaking or French speaking. But I know that some companies are doing some activities for the support and help of Africa.
Mm.
I believe, for the sake of time for the audience, probably we can have a call or a teleconference that I can give you some insights, probably that can help. In addition to the funding, we can try to use the help or support from voluntary activities. You
Mhm.
know, the students, the fresh graduates are
Mm.
willing to help without money as an
Mm.
intern or whatever for their CVs, for their career.
Mm.
And we can see something like this.
Mm.
I know a company that they used to have every year some interns from fresh graduates in some African countries to stay like in Germany or whatever
Mm.
for like 3 months or 6 months or 1 year intern. And
Mm.
then they come back, that they are well trained
Mm.
on pharmacovigilance, on quality, on regulatory affairs and registration and whatever.
Mm.
But we need to make some sort of alignment, promoting this, asking the companies to support or the organizations. I believe knocking the doors will really help.
Mm. Mm.
Personally, I would love to help and volunteer. I am
Mm.
Egyptian, so I am from Africa,
Mhm.
while I live currently in Dubai. But I know that many other people who are willing to help as well.
Yes.
I think this amazing presentation could be a start of giving more hands
Mm.
to support through you, of course.
I hope so. You know, yeah, I mean, the idea of the graduates going to the pharma companies and being properly trained, that is an excellent one. But then they must come back to Africa and they mustn't be stolen, you know, and go elsewhere, because that is part of the tragedy, is that we've got such good people, but they are being taken by the other areas where they will have more development and earn more money, and unfortunately then they are lost to us. And I'm seeing so much of that. I mean, you know, working in academia, you see it all the time. You have these wonderful bright young people that could add so much to the country, and they leave because they've got better opportunities, and one can't blame them, you know. But
Mm.
one thing, and that again goes right back to the funding, because the jobs here don't pay enough.
Yeah, again, this could be support from companies can help.
Mm.
I think Kenya, they have a program that they are trying to push the companies to give a
Mm.
diploma or master degree funded for their employees, okay,
Mm.
in Kenya.
Mm.
So again, if we generate 10, 7 or 8 will leave, 2 will
Yeah,
stay.
yeah.
But next year and the year after, we'll have 100 So 20 or 30 will stay. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we know it's a challenge,
Yes.
but it needs time.
Unfortunately, yes, the time factor,
it
the
needs
time
time.
factor is there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that the whole mid safety and the AU3S program is really it was whoever was the engineer who thought it up, they really are to be commended, because that could be the way to go, because then you've got one app that's collecting everything in the same way right across the country, and you can collate all of that data. And I mean, AfriVigilance, how exciting is that? I hope somebody's going to be talking at the conference on AfriVigilance.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember the program. I know I looked at the program, but
I can send you the final agenda.
That would be
because
wonderful.
I am one of the advisory boards who are arranging the agenda. I will be a moderator and speaker. So I will send you the agenda, and I will try to get from the organizers also free access for you, so you can attend.
That would be wonderful. That would be excellent. Thank you very much. I would really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, it will be virtual 1st and 2nd of November.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you
you
for sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to listen to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Ernst here from Ghana. Would you like to say something, Ernst?
Yes. Hi everyone, Dr. Denise. Excellent presentation. I've learned so much today. We knew things that I was not aware of. I've certainly broadened my horizons. And yes, with this issue of harmonization, we are all fragmented. Everyone is looking out for his or her own should I say purpose or so. So yeah, the African Medicines Agency plan is there. We just hope more countries will ratify so we can have a centralized one like that of the EMA. Because just as you mentioned, almost every PV system in Africa, you look, it has elements of the EMA and PV system in it. So why don't we all just come together and have one as well? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate it.
I'm so glad that you enjoyed it and that it wasn't boring and that you've got something out of it, because I know when I looked at the topic, I mean, I just sort of off the top of my head, when Dr. Chen said to me, would you like to present something else? I said, sure, Africa, pharmacovigilance in Africa, that should be fine. Not thinking for 1 minute how many hours and days that I have spent reading and catching up and emailing and finding out and looking for every resource possible to be able to get as much information as I could. And then when I sat and I looked at all the information and I thought, oh no, this looks like an elephant. It really does. How on earth am I going to present that? Then I thought, one bite at a time in the most reasonable way. So I'm glad that we've at least been able to add value to your knowledge of PV in Africa. Thank you for your comment.
You.
Anyone else like to interact? Thank you then.
Everybody's stunned. Everybody's stunned.
Okay, thank you then. Thank you, Dr. Dennis, for a lovely presentation, and we enjoyed this session a lot. We'll come back with another speaker in next month with GPVS Ambassador Series. So thank you everyone for joining today. We hope you all will join in next month also. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for attending, and have a good afternoon, evening, and day further. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.